Hey y'all, it's Chris with Rockin Farm. Today we're going to be continuing on what has become a video series of what to plant in your Central Texas garden. But before we talk squash, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button down below, click that notification bell, and go visit our website, rockin8farm.com. So what's going to grow well in your Central Texas garden? The good news is when it comes to squash, a lot of stuff, except for one problem. Our climate for growing squash is amazing, but we can get into problems with those squash bugs and those vine borers. Once those get into the plant, they're pretty much toast. The place that we used to live over in the Texas Hill Country, as soon as I would get the zucchini started, they had barely began to set fruit before the plant started withering and wilting. Here we seem to be having a lot better luck with our squash, but I'm gonna have to be smart about this. So the places where I planted squash last year, we will not be planting squash this year. Because if we did get any of those vine borers or squash bugs starting to work their way up into those plants, the one thing that they did do last year was lay eggs down in that soil. So we're gonna move all of our squash to areas that maybe had peppers or tomatoes last year. And the areas that had squash will get something else planted in them. By rotating where you plant your squash from year to year is a really good way to avoid some of that bug damage. Now, when it comes to squash varieties, I've got to switch things up a little bit this year because, so you want to grow what you eat and eat what you grow. So if there's something that I grew last year that we just didn't eat all that much, there's probably not a whole lot of point in growing it again. I also need to think about what may or may not sell well at a market. And a new factor is I have to think about my current diabetic condition. While my health is improving greatly, I want to make sure I stay on that path, and some squash are quite high in sugar. The first thing we're going to grow, we're kind of growing for fun, although it does have a great utilitarian purpose. While not technically a squash, it's kind of in the same family and you planted it about the same time. So this year, we're going to be planting the loofah gourds. Really cool plant, a lot of fun. It's also called the dishcloth gourd. Basically once you let them dry out and peel off that outer layer and shake all the seeds out of them, you have a loofah. The same loofah that you go to an expensive Bath and Body store and pay a lot of money for. So they work great for cleaning grease off of engine parts, and so a great utilitarian purpose both indoors and outdoors. They're fun to grow. The kids have a good time with them. We're just gonna go ahead and give them a run, plant some loofahs, get some loofah sponges, and then we'll plant them again when we get around to it. Now we're going to kind of start talking about a little bit of the nutritional aspect and things that I grew last year that I may or may not grow this year. My butternut squash did amazing in my garden. I got a ton of them. They looked really cool. And I think part of the success was growing them on these arched trellises that you see here behind me. I'm going to go ahead and drop a photo of my butternut squash growing on these arched trellises last year. My wife and I both enjoy butternut squash soup, and when I roast them, she loves the flavor, but it's like a texture thing. I love them any which way, and my kids will eat them if I make them eat them, but they don't really enjoy them. So, grow what you eat what you grow. We don't eat a whole ton of butternut squash. The other problem with butternut squash is we're sitting at about 15 net carbs per serving. That's pretty high when you're really trying to keep your carbs down below 20 or 30 net carbs a day. Now the thing is, it's not just butternut squash that's high in the carbohydrates. It's kind of winter squash in general that's high in the carbohydrates. Summer squash are a lot lower. We're gonna go ahead and make a run at trying to grow something a little bit different this year. And it's not that it's any better on the sugars, it actually has more net carbs, but I think the kids might like them a little bit better. I think my wife might like them a little bit better, and I know that they will sell better at the farmers markets than the butternuts do. So the squash we're gonna try growing this year in lieu of the butternuts is the acorn squash. Only time is going to tell if my kids really enjoy them or not. And again, only time will tell if they really sell well at the farmer's market or not. But, we tried the butternuts. We can do them again in the future. Let's give the acorns a go. Another thing we haven't tried here yet, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to do well for us, is spaghetti squash. My wife has always wanted to grow these, so we're going to give them a go this year. Other squash have done well here, so I don't know why these wouldn't do well either. I'm also personally looking forward to the fact that I can take my very high fat, high protein meat sauce and put them on top of a pasta substitute that only has 5.5 net carbs. And while we're on the topic of pasta substitute, almost everybody's heard of the zoodles or the zucchini noodles. We grew 2 forms of zucchini here last year, and we were unbelievably impressed with both. The only problem we had is that we didn't plant enough bushes. We planted 3 of each and had 6 total zucchini bushes, and we didn't have enough zucchini. When we started giving them to people, they were begging us to give them more. So I know that our family and friends will take any of our excess off of our hands. And I'm also fairly confident that they'll sell well at like a farmer's market type situation. Now, instead of just your good old Black Beauty zucchini, we like to throw a little bit something different into it. Plus, we had heard that some of the other zucchini varieties actually grow better here. So we just started out that way. The first one that we grew last year was the golden zucchini. I'll tell you what, nice big sized zucchinis, even when they get past that like, oh, it's too big, that's going to be bitter, they were still great to chop up and throw into a stew. So you didn't have to worry about them getting too large. Obviously that nice little 4 to 6 inch when they're still only about that big around, that's like that prime spot for getting your zucchini. But even when these goldens got a little bit larger, you could still do a lot with them. And the other one that we grew was the Mexican gray squash or the gray zucchini. Back when we lived in Phoenix, this is something that was super easy to find. And we see it in the grocery stores here too, but we kind of missed it. So being able to grow it ourselves and knowing that it does really well here in Central Texas was a very awesome thing to find out. So between the yellow zucchini and the Mexican gray zucchini, we're gonna have plenty of zucchini. We're gonna plant a lot of shrubs this year. Our friends and family are gonna have zucchini coming out their ears. Now, one of the things that I was really excited to find out about when I started doing my nutritional fact research was that one of the squash varieties that we grew last year did unbelievably well for us. We got so many little squash off of this plant that we literally didn't know what to do with them and had to start giving them to the livestock. That's not a bad problem to have, y'all. I mean, worst case scenario, you're taking edible food and putting it into your compost, but guess what? That just gives you more edible food next year. The yellow scallop squash, also known as the patty pan squash, comes in a lot of different colors and a lot of different variants, but they did really good for us. They did so good that we had to cut the bushes way back because they were just taking over the garden, and we had more squash than we knew what to do with. The kids love them. My wife loves them. Our neighbors love them. They're super tasty, and they're just the perfect little size to take 1 or 2 and cut them up for just a single night's meal. One of the best parts is that while both of my zucchini varieties come in at about 3 net carbs per serving, which is more than doable, very low, and I can eat pretty much all I want, the patty pans come in at 2.6. So I like them even better than I like zucchini, and they're going to meet my dietary needs even better. Now, the last 2 squash varieties that we plan on growing this year are definitely edible and have a ton of uses, but we're really excited about how multifaceted some of their uses are going to be on our homestead. So the last 2 squash that we're planning on growing are both pumpkin varieties. One of them that we're planning on growing is the Seminole pumpkin. They do really well all across the South. Now, it's actually a little bit tough to find some of the nutritional information specifically on Seminole pumpkins because they're such a specific pumpkin variety. Even if their net carbs are no lower than any other pumpkin variety, most of your pumpkin varieties come in at around 7 grams of net carbs. So it's also something that I could put into my diet. Another pumpkin variety that we're going to grow this year is the that pumpkin. Y'all, I don't know what to tell you about this. We picked up a pumpkin at the grocery store a few years back. The end of the season hit, and I took the pumpkin, I threw it on the ground, let it smash to pieces so that our pet pot-bellied pig could just come over and munch on the pumpkin. The next spring I come out and I see these little leaves starting to grow, and I was like, huh, those kind of look like squash leaves. A few months go by and all of a sudden we have this huge vine with big, beautiful flowers, and we couldn't really figure out why this thing was growing here. We do have a natural gourd that grows in this area, and it's one of those gourds that you could eat it if you needed to, but you better be kind of hurting. So it's not a really truly edible gourd, but I just figured that this vine must be one of those. And then it appeared, the pumpkin. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that we had thrown a pumpkin out on the ground there the year before. And I thought to myself, those are the genetics that I want. When you can smash a rotting pumpkin on the ground and one of those seeds finds the ideal conditions to become a huge, massive, beautiful vine, those are the genetics that I want. So I took that pumpkin and I got every seed I could possibly get out of it, and I'm hoping to plant these all over my property. Any place that gets a little moisture or retains a little moisture, around any tree or tree well, random places in the garden, we're gonna plant my random pumpkin and Seminole pumpkins. And the reason we want so many pumpkins is because I discovered something else about pumpkins, and that is that pumpkins are a natural wormer for your pigs. So if I'm gonna be in a position where I'm throwing like maybe a pumpkin a day to the pigs, I need to have lots of pumpkins. And I really like the idea of intestinal parasites being taken care of by pumpkin rather than by some harsh medication that I have to give the animal. That's not to say that we might not start having a big enough intestinal parasite problem that we still have to give the medicine, but if I can do it naturally, that's definitely going to be a goal of mine so that I can just really have that chemical-free, organic, grass-fed pork. So we are going to grow the absolute heck out of pumpkins this year. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, there's about a million different other squash that I would love to grow, but my garden is only so big this year. When we expand the garden again next year and then expand it again the year after that, maybe I can start getting into more varieties. But for now, these are some of the varieties that I know work well for us, and some varieties that I know have worked well for other people that are local. So if you're growing squash in Central Texas, whether it's summer squash or winter squash, I hope you got some good ideas here. And until I see everybody again, this has been Chris with Rockin Farm, and I want everybody to be happy and live healthy.